She'll figure it out, Mark's voice carried through the open cabin window. I froze on the porch, my hands trembling as I heard the unmistakable sound of car engines starting. Mark. I called out, rushing toward the driveway just in time to see our blue SUV fishtailing down the dirt road, followed by his brother Jeff's truck. Their laughter floated back to me on the mountain air. They were leaving. Actually leaving me here. Alone. I stood in the swirling dust, my mind struggling to process what was happening. The argument from breakfast still echoed in my ears. Mark's ultimatum about rehab, my tearful promises that I could quit on my own this time. His brothers chiming in with their own opinions about what I needed, talking about me like I wasn't even there. You can't keep enabling her, Mark, Jeff had said while his younger brother Tom nodded along. Sometimes tough love is the only answer. I hadn't expected tough love to mean abandonment in the Colorado wilderness, 12 miles from the nearest town, with no cell service and no transportation. The cabin grew smaller behind me as I ran down the road, my lungs burning in the thin mountain air. But the vehicles were long gone, disappearing around the bend in a cloud of dust. My legs gave out and I sank to the ground, the rough gravel digging into my knees. This had to be a joke, a scare tactic. They'd come back in an hour, maybe two, expecting to find me desperate and willing to agree to anything. Well, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I'd be calm and collected when they returned. If they returned. Back at the cabin, I paced the rustic living room, checking my watch every few minutes. 1 hour passed. By the third hour, a new sensation began creeping through my body, the first warning signs of withdrawal. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Come on, Mark, I whispered, peering out the window at the empty driveway. You've made your point. But the only response was the wind through the pine trees and the distant call of a hawk. I forced myself to think practically. How long had we planned to stay at this cabin? 5 days. We'd arrived yesterday, so 4 more days of supplies should be here. I took inventory of the kitchen. Enough food, thankfully, though nothing particularly appealing as my stomach began to churn. Water came from a well pump. Electricity was spotty but functional. In the bathroom cabinet I found my prescription bottles. Of course. Mark had been managing my medication for weeks now, doling out pills one at a time, to help me cut back gradually. I slammed the cabinet shut, catching my reflection in the mirror, pale with dark circles under my eyes. I barely recognized myself. How had we gotten here? 5 years ago, Mark had been my salvation after a car accident left me with chronic back pain. He'd been my nurse at the hospital, kind, attentive, understanding about the pain that never seemed to end. The prescriptions helped at first, just enough to function. Then just enough to work. Then just enough to get through the day without feeling like I was crawling out of my skin. Mark had watched the decline, his nurturing nature turning to frustration, then anger, then this cold calculation. Night fell quickly in the mountains. I wrapped myself in a blanket on the sofa as the temperature dropped, too restless to sleep in our bed. Every headlight I imagined on the road sent me rushing to the window, but none materialized. My body alternated between burning up and freezing as the withdrawal intensified. By morning, I knew they weren't coming back anytime soon. This wasn't a few hours of scare tactics. This was abandonment, pure and simple. I stumbled to the kitchen, desperate for anything that might ease the symptoms. My hands shook so badly I dropped a mug, watching helplessly as it shattered on the floor. Tears welled up, not from the loss of the mug but from the realization of how dependent I'd become, on the medication, on Mark, on a life that had shrunk down to the space between doses. Outside, the beauty of the wilderness mocked my misery. Snow-capped mountains rose in the distance, indifferent to my suffering. A family of deer grazed peacefully at the edge of the clearing, freedom embodied in their graceful movements. I envied them their liberty, their wholeness. When was the last time I had felt whole? The cabin had always been Mark's special place, his family's retreat for generations. He knew every inch of these woods. I, on the other hand, was a city girl who considered roughing it to be a hotel without room service. My outdoor knowledge was limited to identifying poison ivy and how to hail a taxi in the rain. But I did know one thing: 12 miles was walkable. Difficult, especially in my condition, but not impossible. I searched the cabin for anything useful. In a closet I found fishing gear, some old hiking boots that were too big but better than my flimsy sneakers, and a dusty backpack. Most importantly, I found a map, crinkled and sun-faded, but clearly marking the trail to town. My hands trembled as I traced the route with my finger. One path followed the main road, longest but simplest. Another cut through the forest, shorter but more challenging. Either way, in my current state, it would be a grueling journey. As I gathered supplies, I found Mark's satellite phone tucked in a drawer. Hope surged through me, only to crash when I realized the battery was dead, the charger nowhere to be found. Another calculated move on his part. I sank onto the edge of the bed, our bed, where just 2 nights ago he had held me and promised we would get through this rough patch together. "I'll always be there for you, Ellie," he'd whispered. The memory twisted like a knife in my chest. The withdrawal symptoms worsened throughout the day. I couldn't keep food down. My muscles cramped painfully. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by vivid nightmares where I was always falling, always alone. By the 3rd morning, something shifted inside me. Perhaps it was hitting rock bottom, or perhaps it was the strange clarity that sometimes comes through suffering. I looked at my reflection again, gaunt, hollow-eyed, but somehow more present than I had been in months. "Is this who you want to be?" I asked my reflection. The woman staring back at me had once been ambitious, independent. Before the accident, before the pain, before the pills. That woman wouldn't wait around to be rescued or punished. I filled the backpack with water bottles, granola bars, a flashlight, and the map. I left behind anything connected to my old life. Makeup, the novel I'd been too foggy to read, the expensive hiking clothes Mark had bought me for this trip that I'd never wanted to take. At the door, I hesitated, looking back at the cabin that had been meant as a retreat but had become my prison instead. Part of me still believed Mark and his brothers might return, apologetic and concerned. The rational part knew better. I stepped outside into the crisp mountain air, feeling the sun on my face. The withdrawal symptoms hadn't disappeared, but something else was emerging alongside them: determination. Each step down the driveway was agony, my body protesting the exertion and the absence of chemical comfort. But each step was also mine. My choice. My action. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't waiting for the next dose, the next promise, the next disappointment. I was moving forward on my own power, however diminished it might be. The road stretched ahead, intimidating in its emptiness. But I had nothing but time and the growing conviction that whatever waited for me at the end of this road, it had to be better than what I was leaving behind. "She'll figure it out," Mark had said, not knowing how right he would be. Just not in the way he intended. I adjusted the 2 big boots, straightened my shoulders, and began to walk. The mountain trail stretched before me like an accusation. 2 hours into my journey, each step had become a negotiation with my rebelling body. My mouth was desert dry despite the water I'd been carefully rationing. The oversized hiking boots had rubbed angry blisters on both heels. But something unexpected was happening. Memories surfaced as I walked, not of Mark or my recent past, but of childhood camping trips with my father. He'd been an avid outdoorsman, patiently teaching me to read trail markers, identify edible plants, and navigate by landmarks. Skills I'd abandoned when I moved to the city, deemed irrelevant to my adult life. "Always follow water downhill if you're lost, Eleanor," his voice echoed in my mind. "Water leads to civilization." I paused, considering the map again. The trail I'd chosen roughly paralleled a stream that eventually joined the river near the town of Pine Ridge. Following it would be slightly longer but more reliable than the unmarked forest path. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, adjusting my course. By midday, the worst of the morning's withdrawal symptoms had evolved into a different kind of misery, a bone-deep exhaustion coupled with muscles screaming in protest. I rested beside the stream, splashing cold water on my face and refilling my bottles. The forest's beauty began penetrating my discomfort. Wildflowers dotting sunny patches, the musical gurgle of the stream, bird song overhead. When was the last time I'd noticed such things? The medication had dulled everything, not just pain. A rustling in the underbrush startled me. I scrambled to my feet as an elderly man emerged from the trees, carrying a fishing rod and a string of trout. "Well now," he said, tilting his weathered hat. "Don't often see folks on this stretch." I backed away instinctively, awareness of my vulnerability in these woods suddenly acute. "Don't mean to frighten you," he said, maintaining his distance. "Carson Miller. Got a cabin, 'bout half a mile upstream." "Ellie," I replied, offering no last name. "I'm hiking to Pine Ridge." He studied me, taking in my city clothes, the 2 big boots, my pale, sweaty face. That's a fair stretch in your condition, ma'am. My condition. Was it that obvious? Shame burned through me. I'm fine, I lied. Just taking a break. Carson nodded slowly. My cabin's on your way. Least I could offer is a hot meal before you continue. No strings. Every warning bell should have been ringing, but something in his grandfatherly manner disarmed me. Plus, my options were limited. I appreciate that, I said cautiously. His cabin was modest but meticulously maintained. While he prepared a simple meal of fresh trout and potatoes, I sat on his porch watching golden light filter through the trees. Your husband know where you are? Carson asked, setting a plate before me. I nearly choked on my first bite. What makes you think I'm married? He gestured to my ring finger, where the tan line from my recently removed wedding band was visible. It's complicated, I admitted. Usually is, he replied, not pressing further. The hot meal restored some of my strength. As we ate, Carson shared stories of 40 years living in these mountains, of losing his wife to cancer, of children who visited occasionally but preferred city life. Why'd you help me? Asked finally. I could be anyone. Carson considered this. Been where you are in my way. After Marie died, I crawled into a bottle for 2 years. My daughter found me one winter nearly frozen on my own porch. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a sobriety medallion tattooed on his forearm. 26 years now. Something inside me crumbled at his simple honesty. I'm trying to get clean, I whispered the first time I'd said those words aloud and actually meant them. Carson nodded. Figured as much. Got a guest room if you need a night to gather yourself. I accepted his offer, sleeping for 12 straight hours in the small, clean bedroom that had once belonged to his daughter. In the morning he drove me halfway to Pine Ridge in his ancient pickup as far as the rough mountain roads would allow. Town's 4 miles that way, he said, pointing down a better-maintained road. Doctor, there's good people. Name's Harriet Jenkins. I thanked him, overwhelmed by his kindness. Don't thank me, Carson replied gruffly. Just live a life worth saving. The walk into Pine Ridge took nearly 2 hours. By the time I reached the town's single main street, lined with faded storefronts and a handful of tourist shops, my body was functioning on determination alone. The Pine Ridge Diner sat at the center of town, a bell jingling as I pushed through its glass door. Heads turned, locals assessing an unfamiliar face. I slid into a booth, ordering coffee from a waitress whose name tag read Betsy. Reality crashed down as I searched my pockets. No wallet. No phone. No identity beyond the clothes on my back. I'm sorry, I told Betsy when she returned. I can't pay for this. Instead of anger, her expression softened with concern. You're right, honey. You look like you've been through it. The simple kindness undid me. Tears came without warning, months of suppressed emotion breaking through. I just need to make a call, I managed between sobs. Betsy guided me to the diner's office phone. My fingers hovered over the keypad. Who could I call? Mark? My estranged parents? Friends I'd pushed away as my addiction worsened? The moments stretched, filled with possibility. I could call Mark, end this nightmare, go home to the familiar patterns, both comforting and destructive. Or I could not. Actually, I said, lowering the receiver, is there somewhere in town I could stay for a few days? Maybe find some work. Betsy considered this. Motel might hire you for housekeeping. Owner owes me a favor. As she made arrangements, commotion erupted in the diner. A man clutched his chest, collapsing against a table. Heart attack, someone shouted. Call an ambulance. Before I understood what was happening, I was kneeling beside him, memory surfacing from my 3 years as an ER administrative assistant before the accident. Sir, can you hear me? I checked his pulse, rapid but present. Has this happened before? His wife nodded frantically. His medication, in his pocket. I found the nitroglycerin tablet, helping him place it under his tongue. Ambulance is coming. Try to stay calm and breathe slowly. Time slowed as we waited, my hand holding his, offering reassurance I didn't know I possessed. When the paramedics arrived, I relayed the information clearly, stepping back as they took over. You a nurse? One of them asked as they prepared to transport him. No, I answered. Just remembered some things. After they left, Betsy approached with fresh coffee and a sandwich. That was something. You staying in town just got more interesting. The motel owner offered me a room in exchange for work. The diner provided meals. A local charity furnished basic necessities, clothes, toiletries, a journal where I began recording my journey through withdrawal. Each day brought challenges, physical pain, cravings, moments of despair. But each day also brought something unexpected, clarity. Small kindnesses, moments of usefulness. 1 week after arriving in Pine Ridge, I stood at the town's single payphone, quarters in hand, Mark's number memorized. My finger traced the familiar digits without pressing them. A passing ambulance caught my attention, its siren awakening something inside me. A memory of purpose, of helping others through their worst moments. I pocketed the quarters and turned toward the small medical clinic where Dr. Jenkins worked. Perhaps it was time to help myself by helping others. Mark's number remained undialed, my first deliberate step away from the life that had nearly destroyed me. Dr. Jenkins was the one who suggested Seattle. My niece works at Harborview Medical Center, she said one evening as I helped reorganize her cramped filing system. They're always looking for EMTs and they have a training program that might suit you. After 3 weeks in Pine Ridge, I'd become something of a fixture at the clinic. My administrative background proved useful, and Dr. Jenkins didn't ask questions about my past that I wasn't ready to answer. I don't have credentials, I reminded her. Or a permanent address. Or ID. My wallet had been in Mark's car when he drove away. She slid a folder across her desk. Started the paperwork for you. Birth certificates on its way from Illinois. Temporary ID applications ready. Carson Miller's willing to be your local reference. My throat tightened. Why are you helping me? Because you've helped us, she said simply. And because everyone deserves a second chance. 2 days later, I boarded a Greyhound bus with everything I owned in a backpack. 3 changes of clothes, $200 saved from odd jobs, and a letter of recommendation from Dr. Jenkins to her niece. The journey to Seattle took nearly 14 hours. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching the landscape transform from mountain wilderness to rolling farmland to the dense urban sprawl of the Pacific Northwest. Each mile put distance between me and the cabin, between who I had been and who I might become. Seattle greeted me with steady rain and towering buildings that seemed to touch the low-hanging clouds. I navigated to a women's shelter using directions Dr. Jenkins had written down, grateful for a safe place to land while I found my footing. 30-day maximum stay, the intake coordinator explained as she showed me to a small bed in a room shared with 3 other women. Job placement assistance is available. Counseling too. I accepted both. The job counselor helped me create a resume that emphasized my administrative skills and glossed over the gaps. The therapist, a woman named Vivian with kind eyes and uncompromising questions, helped me navigate the complexities of recovery without medication. Addiction is often about pain management, she explained during our second session. We need to find healthier ways for you to cope. Through Vivian, I connected with a recovery support group that met 3 evenings a week in a church basement near the shelter. There, surrounded by strangers with their own battles, I spoke my truth aloud for the first time. My name is Eleanor and I'm recovering from prescription drug addiction. The words hung in the air, terrifying and liberating. No one judged. No one questioned. They simply nodded in recognition of a shared struggle. Dr. Jenkins' niece Sarah proved to be another unexpected ally. She worked as a nurse in Harborview's busy emergency department and offered to give me a tour of the facility. EMT training is intense, she warned as we walked through the controlled chaos of the ER. Physically and emotionally demanding. But if you can handle it, there's nothing more rewarding. I watched the seamless coordination between doctors, nurses, and emergency medical technicians, each playing a vital role in saving lives. For the first time since the accident that had started my downward spiral, I felt a spark of purpose. How do I apply? I asked. The EMT training program required a clean drug test and background check, both of which I passed. Using my newly issued temporary ID under my maiden name Eleanor Pierce, I enrolled in the accelerated course, 8 weeks of intensive study and practical training. My days fell into a demanding rhythm. Mornings at the training center learning medical protocols and emergency procedures. Afternoons practicing skills on mannequins and fellow students. Evenings at my new job stocking shelves at a 24-hour pharmacy, ironically surrounded by the very medications I'd once depended on. The small apartment I found was nothing like the spacious suburban home I'd shared with Mark. A studio with minimal furniture, located above a noisy laundromat in a working-class neighborhood. But it was mine, paid for with my own earnings, decorated with plants and second-hand finds that reflected my emerging sense of self. On difficult nights when cravings hit or memories of my former life threatened to overwhelm me, I'd open the textbooks and lose myself in the study of human anatomy, first aid protocols and emergency response procedures. Knowledge became my new addiction, healthier, purposeful. 6 weeks into training, our class responded to a simulated multi-car accident. As artificial smoke filled the training area and actors portrayed injured victims, something clicked inside me. The chaos that would have once sent me searching for chemical calm instead focused my mind with crystal clarity. Elderly male, possible head trauma, altered consciousness, I reported calmly to my instructor as I stabilized the mock patient. Prioritizing airway maintenance and cervical spine immobilization. Excellent assessment, Pierce, my instructor noted. Your calm under pressure is your strongest asset. That night in my apartment, I stood before the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection. The gaunt, hollow-eyed woman from the cabin had been replaced by someone stronger, still thin but with clear eyes and steady hands. I'd been sober for 2 months and 6 days. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future beyond survival. A career helping others through their worst moments. A life defined by more than pain and its management. My final exam included both written and practical components. The written portion tested our knowledge of procedures, medications, and protocols. The practical exam placed us in realistic emergency scenarios where instructors evaluated our responses. Patient is a 34-year-old female found unresponsive with signs of opioid overdose, the instructor announced as I approached my testing station. I faltered momentarily, the scenario hitting too close to home. Then training took over. I performed the assessment methodically, administered the simulated naloxone, monitored vital signs and communicated clearly with my team. Time, the instructor called. Pierce, your patient survived. Well done. 2 days later I received my certification. That same afternoon, with Sarah's recommendation, I interviewed at a private ambulance company that contracted with several Seattle hospitals. By evening I had secured my first position as an EMT. My first real emergency call came 3 days into the job. A teenager who had fallen from a skateboard, possible concussion and broken wrist. As my partner drove, I prepared the equipment we might need, my mind focused solely on the task ahead. When we arrived, the boy's mother was frantic, alternating between Spanish and English as she described what happened. I knelt beside her son, making eye contact. I'm Ellie, I said calmly. I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name? Miguel, he whispered, clutching his injured arm. Miguel, I'm going to take care of you, okay? Every step of the way. As I assessed his injuries, applied a splint, and monitored his vitals during transport, a profound realization settled over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about my own pain. I was fully present for someone else's. That evening, I added a new entry to the journal I'd kept since Pine Ridge. Today I saved someone instead of needing to be saved. 6 months sober tomorrow. I fell asleep with the window open, listening to the sounds of my new city. Car horns, distant sirens, the steady rhythm of rain on the fire escape. Each sound a reminder that I was here now, alive in ways I hadn't been for years. Seattle wasn't just a location on a map. It was becoming home. The place where Eleanor Pierce was rebuilding herself, one emergency, one day, one choice at a time. The 6-month milestone deserved celebration. My recovery group had a tradition. Those reaching significant sobriety landmarks received a medallion and the chance to share their journey. I'd been preparing what to say for weeks, carefully crafting the story of my transformation from the cabin to now. After the meeting, a few of us went for coffee at the diner across the street. Rain pounded against the windows as we laughed and shared stories. Ordinary moments that once would have seemed impossible. You coming to the cookout Sunday? Asked Tara, a nurse 3 years into her own recovery. Can't, I replied. I'm on shift. But save me some of your famous potato salad. It was nearly midnight when I unlocked my apartment door, my mind already shifting to tomorrow's early shift. The hallway light flickered as it always did, casting strange shadows across the worn carpet. I was fumbling with my keys when I felt it, that prickle of awareness that I wasn't alone. The door to my apartment stood slightly ajar. Training kicked in. I backed away quietly, phone in hand, ready to call for help. Then a shadow moved inside my apartment. Ellie. The voice froze me in place. A voice I'd heard in both my sweetest dreams and worst nightmares for 6 months. Mark. He stepped into the hallway looking both familiar and like a stranger. Thinner, with shadows under his eyes and a beard I'd never seen before. How did you find me? My voice sounded distant, belonging to someone else. Can we talk inside? He asked, glancing at the narrow hallway. Please. Self-preservation warred with curiosity. The Eleanor who had left the cabin would have run. The Eleanor who had built a new life in Seattle stood her ground. 5 minutes, I said, brushing past him into my own apartment. The small space felt impossibly crowded with him in it. Mark stood awkwardly by the kitchenette, taking in the sparse furnishings, the EMT textbooks, the plant collection that had become my hobby. You look good, he said finally. Healthy. Why are you here? I folded my arms across my chest, maintaining distance between us. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so achingly familiar it hurt. You disappeared. After the cabin you just vanished. Do you have any idea what that's been like? A laugh escaped me, sharp and incredulous. Do I have any idea? You abandoned me in the wilderness, Mark. You and your brothers drove away laughing about how I'd figure it out. So yes, I figured it out. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, he insisted, anguish crossing his features. It was meant to be an intervention. An intervention? The word hung between us, absurd in its inadequacy. Jeff and Tom convinced me you needed a wake-up call. A controlled environment away from access, where you'd have to face the addiction. His voice cracked. I was desperate, Ellie. I'd tried everything else. So you left me alone in withdrawal, miles from anywhere? The calm in my voice surprised me. That wasn't an intervention. That was punishment. I was coming back that night, Mark said, sinking onto my second-hand couch. With a counselor. Someone who specialized in addiction. Everything was arranged. Then what happened? Car accident on the mountain road. Nothing serious, but it blocked the only route back to the cabin. By the time they cleared it the next day, you were gone. He looked up, eyes haunted. I searched everywhere. Called hospitals, police stations. No one had seen you. The revelation landed like a stone in still water, ripples of doubt disturbing my carefully constructed narrative. You were coming back. Not a question, but a statement testing the weight of this new truth. Of course I was coming back. Mark's voice broke. You're my wife. The word struck me physically. Wife. A title I'd left behind in that cabin along with the addiction and dependence it represented. How did you find me? I asked again. A doctor in Pine Ridge. Jenkins. I've been searching for months, calling medical facilities in every direction from the cabin. When I mentioned your background in healthcare, she hesitated. I knew she knew something. Dr. Jenkins. My ally. My gateway to this new life. Had she betrayed me or helped reunite a worried husband with his missing wife? The lines blurred uncomfortably. She didn't tell me where you were, Mark continued. Just that you were safe and finding your way. But she let slip something about her niece. I tracked down every Jenkins with medical connections in the Northwest. Methodical. Persistent. The qualities that had once made Mark an excellent nurse now repurposed for finding me. That's borderline stalking, I pointed out. That's love, Ellie. Desperate, flawed love. I moved to the window, needing space, air. Outside, Seattle continued its midnight rhythm, cars splashing through puddles, neon signs reflecting on wet pavement. I'm not the same person, I said finally. The woman you married doesn't exist anymore. I know. His voice was quiet. I can see that. For the first time I really looked at him. Not the memory, not the villain of my story, but the man sitting on my couch. Exhaustion lined his face. His hands, those steady nurse's hands that had once cared for me after the accident, trembled slightly. What happened after I left? I asked. I kept searching. Took leave from work. My brothers finally admitted the intervention was a terrible idea. Tom's marriage nearly ended when his wife found out what they'd done. Mark's gaze held mine. Nothing's been right since you've been gone. And now? What do you want now that you've found me? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. I don't know, he admitted. To make sure you're okay. To apologize. To understand how everything went so wrong. A year ago I would have fallen into his arms, grateful for rescue, desperate for the comfort of the familiar. 6 months ago I would have ordered him out, clinging fiercely to my hard-won independence. Today I found myself in uncharted territory, strong enough to face him, uncertain enough to question my own narrative. I'm sober, I said simply. 6 months today actually. Pride flickered across his face. That's incredible, Ellie. It is, I agreed. And I did it without you. I needed to. Silence settled between us, not entirely uncomfortable. I have an early shift tomorrow, I said finally. I can't do this tonight. Mark nodded, standing slowly as if each movement required calculation. Can I see you again? Maybe for coffee? The easy answer would be no. The clean break, the narrative of abandonment and triumph, required his permanent exit from my story. But the truth, messy, complicated, and necessary for genuine healing, demanded more. Sunday afternoon, I said. There's a coffee shop on Pike Street. I'll text you the address. You have my number? Surprise lightened his features. Of course I do. I just chose not to use it. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, I never stopped looking for you. Not for a single day. After he left, I stood in my quiet apartment, the echo of his presence still lingering. I pulled out my journal, opening to a fresh page. Day 183, I wrote. Mark found me. The story I've been telling myself isn't the whole truth. I don't know what happens next, but I'm strong enough now to find out. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed in my narrow bed, Mark's revelations playing on repeat in my mind. Dawn found me at my small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, watching the city slowly illuminate. My phone chimed with a text from Tara. How's the birthday girl feeling? Still on for group dinner tomorrow? The ordinary question from my new life collided with the extraordinary reappearance of my old one. I hadn't told anyone about Mark's visit. Not Tara, not my sponsor Diane, not my therapist Vivian. I needed to process this alone first. Sunday arrived with unexpected sunshine breaking through Seattle's perpetual cloud cover. I chose the meeting spot carefully. A busy coffee shop near Pike Place Market where tourists and locals mingled. Public enough to feel safe, anonymous enough for privacy. I arrived early, claiming a corner table with sight lines to both exits. Old habits from a life of anxiety. The barista recognized me from my regular morning visits. The usual? She asked. Not today, I surprised myself by saying. I'll try something new. Small choices. Small changes. Symbols of a woman who could face uncertainty. Mark entered exactly on time, scanning the room before spotting me. He'd shaved the beard, looking more like the man I'd married. He approached hesitantly as if I might flee. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I said I would. Reliability was my new cornerstone. The conversation began awkwardly, skimming the surface of safe topics. The Seattle weather, his work, my new apartment. Then as our coffee cooled, we dove into deeper waters. I've spent months imagining what I'd say if I found you, Mark admitted. Now I can't remember any of it. Start with what happened after I left the cabin, I suggested. I need to understand. He described returning to find me gone, the frantic search through the woods, the calls to local authorities. His brothers had finally admitted their part in the plan had gone too far. What had begun as a misguided intervention had become a nightmare none of them expected. I filed a missing person report, he said. But since you're an adult who left voluntarily, there wasn't much they could do. I listened without interrupting, allowing his perspective to exist alongside mine, two versions of the same story. Your turn, he said finally. What happened to you? So I told him, the walk through the wilderness, Carson's kindness, Pine Ridge, and finally Seattle. I described the withdrawal without medication, the women's shelter, the EMT training. A journey of reinvention. You did all that alone, he said quietly. I had to. The truth emerged, simple and undeniable. I couldn't heal in the same environment where I got sick. Understanding dawned in his eyes. It wasn't just the pills, was it? It was us. Me. It was everything, I clarified. The accident, the chronic pain, the prescriptions. But yes, also our marriage. The way it enabled me, the way it constrained me. I needed to find out who I was without all of it. The conversation shifted to my recovery, my work as an EMT, my new community. Mark listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his medical background and genuine interest. I'd like you to meet some people, I said suddenly, the idea forming as I spoke it. People who've become important to me. The suggestion surprised us both. Yet it felt right. These worlds needed to intersect if I was ever to make sense of my past and present. That evening, I brought Mark to dinner with my recovery group friends. I introduced him simply as someone from my past who's part of my story. Tara raised an eyebrow but welcomed him warmly. Others followed her lead, including him in conversations about everyday things. Movies, restaurants, weekend plans. Watching Mark interact with my new circle brought unexpected clarity. He seemed smaller somehow, less the towering figure who had dominated my narrative. Just a man, flawed, well-intentioned, struggling with his own regrets. After dinner we walked along the waterfront, the conversation easier now. Your friends are good people, he observed. They're my safety net, I explained. What my life was missing before. We stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the bay, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. The moment demanded honesty. I can't go back, Mark, I said gently. Not to our home, not to our marriage as it was. Pain flickered across his face but he nodded. I know. I wouldn't ask you to. I'm not sure what's possible moving forward either, I continued. I'm still learning who this new version of me is. Would you be open to me getting to know her too? He asked. The question hung between us, weighted with potential paths, reconciliation, friendship, closure, or something not yet defined. Slowly, I decided. Very slowly. And with boundaries. The next morning I called my former mother-in-law, Barbara. Her tearful response to hearing my voice confirmed what Mark had said. They had been searching, worried, blaming themselves. We should have stopped it, she said. That ridiculous plan the boys cooked up. Tom and Jeff feel terrible about their part in it. It's complicated, I acknowledged, surprising myself with the absence of anger. Everyone was trying to help in their own misguided way. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a single moment but a process. Messy, incomplete, ongoing. 2 weeks later I took a personal day and drove with Mark back to Colorado. The journey that had once represented abandonment became a pilgrimage of reclamation. We stopped in Pine Ridge, where I introduced Mark to Carson and Dr. Jenkins, connecting pieces of my fragmented story. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, less threatening. Standing in the driveway where I'd watched the cars disappear, I felt a circle closing. I need to do this alone, I told Mark, who waited by the car, respecting my space. Inside nothing had changed, the same rustic furniture, the same mountain view through the windows. Yet everything had changed because I had changed. Where once I'd seen prison walls, I now saw merely a structure of wood and stone, holding no power over me. I sat on the porch steps, breathing in the pine-scented air, finally able to see the beauty that had been invisible during my withdrawal. The mountains stood majestic and indifferent, witnesses to both my despair and my rebirth. When I returned to the car, Mark searched my face. Okay. Yes, I answered truthfully. I am. Back in Seattle, life resumed its rhythm. I continued my EMT shifts, my recovery meetings, my therapy sessions. Mark returned to Denver but visited monthly, each time fitting more comfortably into the edges of my new existence without trying to reclaim the center. 6 months after his reappearance, I accepted a position as a training coordinator for new EMTs, a role that acknowledged both my medical background and my personal journey through crisis. On my 1-year sobriety anniversary, I stood before my recovery group, the medallion cool in my palm. My name is Eleanor, I began, and my recovery story isn't just about substances. It's about finding myself in the wilderness, both literal and figurative. It's about discovering that sometimes what looks like abandonment can become the doorway to freedom. And it's about learning that healing doesn't mean erasing your past, but integrating it into who you're becoming. In the back of the room sat Mark, his presence neither threatening nor defining, but simply part of the complex tapestry of my life. Our future remained unwritten, but the present held a peace I'd never imagined possible when I stood alone in that cabin driveway. The path forward was mine to choose, step by careful step, one day at a time.